He worked with Bishop Murphy and then Burnett, and now Peter Sarton. Do I say that correctly?
Yes, he's much in
the delegate.
these days.
The delegate. His two articles have really sort of just lifted him into the orbit of the public discourse. What if we just said wait about the implementation of the Roman Missal? And then just recently, we probably have seen it, the other second follow-up article, What's Next in America? He's a pastor, a liturgist. He's just a
Rebel, Roger?
rebel. He is directly responsible for the survey that came out of the Association of Pittsburgh Priests that was organized by Bernard Serval. And Bernie put together this survey, and he sent it to all of the people who responded to Mike's first article.
Well, the priest.
Priests. And all the priests. And it was through the response to that, put together with a survey following the Irish Association of Catholic Priests that was sent out, and the thing that was overwhelming was that people wanted to really recover Vatican II's promise and values. And so from that, we had a meeting in the Association of Pittsburgh Priests. 7 people formed a steering committee that eventually met for several months by telephone, and we planned this founders retreat at Mundelein. 27 of us showed, and we founded the Association of U.S. Catholic Priests. At that event in Mundelein, August 26th, 27th, and 25th, 26th, and 27th. Because of that, we're here. It's just amazing. It's in such a fast pace, and how well things have come together, and in so many ways we owe it to this man. So I present to you my right.
Len, you're way too generous, and I have a lot to live up to there, and some to live down to. I should have thanked you very much. I think I don't resemble all those remarks. You know, I don't know about you. I'm just feeling a little battle fatigue from the last or from the last years. I'm not sure what. But, so, and the battle fatigue does not lessen when I look, did not lessen or does not lessen when I look at the title given for my talk. I feel, were any of you at Reverend Weeklands yesterday? Well, because he's an archbishop, I guess he can take liberties that the lesser mortals like me can, but he, on the spot, you know, rebaptized his talk and gave the talk he intended to. I submitted a title for a talk to Bernie, where are you?
Not me.
Some months ago, Bernie, but I never got an email back from you, so I assumed it was just fine. Anyway, what I see here was not what I said I would do. How pastors can keep alive the spirit and vision of Vatican II, alive, there's alive twice, actually it's a very alive thing, in their parishes in the face of retrenchment. So alive, and retrenchment. I never came up with that title, and I think any one of you here could probably you know, answer that as well as I could. I mean, I have some ideas about how I do it, where I am, and I'm sure you do too. And if what I prepared doesn't take us very long or very far, then maybe we can just have a free-flowing discussion about how do you keep the spirit of Vatican II alive in a time when Vatican II is being, you know, run away from, almost. Not just moved away from, but I think run away from. I thought that, especially the other day when I read the in one of the internet source, the Bernard Follet, you know, one of the 4 Lefebvre's bishops, the one who's really the spokesperson and the one most likely, I guess, to swim the Tiber, or whatever the expression might be. But when I read what he was saying about his theology which apparently Benedict and others in Rome are ready to embrace, or at least I'm afraid to think they are. I think to myself, if that happens, then Vatican II, not just the spirit of Vatican II, but Vatican II itself, in terms of liturgy, religious liberty, and I'm not talking about the kind the bishops are talking about so much today, religious liberty, ecumenism, and interfaith, at least those are out the door, and I'm not sure what else. So how do you keep the spirit of Vatican II, or the reality of Vatican II alive, when all of that's going on and it doesn't seem to be on the back burner? I was in Rome in the fall, last fall. I spent a long evening with Bob Mickens, who is the Rome correspondent for the Tablet. Anybody here from Toledo? Yeah, well, you know Bob. And Bob's over dinner, and it wasn't, hey Len, thanks a minute. It wasn't over too many glasses of wine. Told me, trust me, he said. This rapprochement between Lefebvrists and the Vatican is not just smoke, it's going to happen. And I said, Bob, you absolutely can't be serious. He said, trust me, I've been tracking it, it is going to happen. Well, everything I've read since tells me, there is no, now it doesn't look like there's just one Lefebvrist group. There's Fillet and there's others that may or may not come with them, but some of them it looks like, are going to find a way in. And what they bring with them and what they bring to us is to me, just absolutely mind-numbingly scary. But that's, maybe we can, toward the end here, maybe talk about how in this climate that we're all dealing with, and we're all Vatican II guys. I don't see anybody here that's anything other than Vatican II. How do we deal with that and keep it alive, and maybe we can reinforce each other? Let me, though, spend the first few minutes just saying, here's the title I gave, and I thought I was going to do a missal. And it had to do with the Roman Missal, and it was called the What If Initiative. Is there a place in the church for loyal opposition? And maybe that's not a bad question after the discussions we had in the hall there for the last hour and a half. Is there a place in the church for loyal opposition? Frankly, I was a little chagrined. I think the proposal I spent yesterday, withdrew today, I don't think it was really all that gutsy. I don't think it was any gutsier than the articles I did for American Magazine or the Tablet or interviews I've done beyond that, which I didn't consider to be so terribly gutsy, but I was surprised a lot of people thought so, which tells me we are in a climate where any kind of speaking up is regarded as being gutsy. And whatever happened to us, I say to myself, whatever did happen to priest, prophet, and king? We're pretty good on priest. We do the cultic thing very well. We do the king thing very well, and I don't mean in a lordly way. I think we do it in a humble servant way. I think we do. But whatever did happen to the prophetic part, and it scares me. And I indict myself just as much. And just when I speak up, as I've done in these articles, and people say, God, you're so courageous, you're so brave. I think, come on, I don't think so. That isn't how I see myself at all. I spoke up recently in Seattle on an issue having to do with a referendum trying to overturn gay marriage legislation that our legislature passed handily. But then, of course, the forces went to try to overturn it by referendum. They had to gather signatures. Who was right in the front row of gathering signatures? But yours truly, the Roman Catholic Church, along with, of course, the very conservative Protestants, none of the mainline Protestants, and some fringe groups. We were right there, and our bishops were encouraging us, take the signatures in church, and happily, and I'll give my Archbishop credit, he did in a private communication to the priests, not telling the rest of the world because he didn't want to dilute it, but to us he said, it's your call, whether you do it or not. Well, I sent an email to 3,000 parishioners who said, here's my call, our call, after I consulted with my leadership. We will not be collecting signatures at church to overturn this legislation. Well, my God, you thought, talk about, I became the hero of the city, practically. I know that we're burning incense before my shrine. That didn't take much courage at all. It really didn't. I just accepted what was allowed and realized in doing so I was going to alienate a certain number of people and make a lot of other people happy. But that wasn't the calculation. The calculation was, as you know, it's what you do. What's right? What do you do? And I was pretty convinced, and so were my co-workers, pretty convinced what was right. So, loyal opposition. The what if initiative. Is there a place in the church for loyal opposition? I think there is. And I do believe in loyal opposition because I'm part of the body Catholic, as all of you are. I think opposition, if it's going to be expressed, needs to be done prudently, loyally, not with anger and in a firebrand way, but rather in a reasoned way, sometimes with a little humor, that always helps. But done. It needs to be done, and I'm absolutely convinced of this. But I have to tell you, some of the early attempts at a title besides the loyal opposition was I thought of saying, in commenting on my effort, a possible title for this talk would be An Exercise in Futility, or Grassroots Movement in a Deaf Church, or 23,000 Catholics Can Be Wrong. That's how many signed. Actually, it's more like 23,300 now. They keep signing, dribs and drabs. Or, to quote the scripture, we had hoped. One of my favorite lines from Luke's Gospel, and it really seems to apply these days a lot. We had hoped. Or something like that. Anyway, I want to just tell you a little about where that whole thing came from. Stop me if you think this is taking you to places you don't want to go. I'll gloss through it pretty quickly, and then we can talk about something else. Where did it come from? Where did the whole thing? Well, you came from probably the same place all you were. I read the Catholic magazines, publications. I knew what was coming down the road, although back in 2009 it seemed like a long ways off. But it was actually brewing long before that. I remember reading an article in Commonweal magazine by John Wilkins, former editor of the Tablet. John Wilkins wrote a long piece in the Tablet in 2005. I mean, not the Tablet, the Commonweal, in which he told the whole sordid, and I do mean sordid, tale of the development of the Roman Missal, where Liturgiam Authenticum came from, the whole setting aside of the 1997 work of ISIL, which was magisterial work of the first quality. I've gotten acquainted over these years now, since I got involved with this, with John Robert Page, who was the executive secretary for ISIL, the noblest guy, layperson, the brightest, the most committed Catholic, the most talented liturgist and linguist, etc. I've ever come into contact. John, who was summarily pushed to the side and thrown out because of a power play in Rome, and that's the only way to describe it. And part of that power play was the Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago, who carried the water for the Roman Curia back to the ISIL meeting in Washington, D.C. and said, if you don't bend on this, then Rome will throw you all out. I mean, you'll incur the disfavor of Rome. Wilkins quotes the whole thing. It's there. Everybody should read it, just for, to know what happened and how this came about. That was 2005, I think October, in Commonweal.
What's his name?
John Wilkins. I can't give you the title of the article, but it's in the 2000, I believe the fall, one of the fall issues, Commonweal 2005. He tells it all. And it really should be read. I read that, and my Irish got up. I really found myself just steaming to think that this kind of thing could be put across. And the bishops, God bless them, were lying down like a doormat. The great bishops like Dennis Hurley, the great hero of the council, South Africa, Durban, South Africa, Dennis Hurley, turned out. Some of the great minds that were working on translation for decades turned out and embarrassed publicly by this cabal, and I don't know what else to call it, with Francis George very much behind it, and others, of course, repopulating ISIL with yes men, some from this country, we know their names, I won't mention them, some from England, some from Australia. They put together a whole new thing in response to Liturgiam Authenticum, which of course came out of Rome under the aegis, I believe, of a South American Spanish-speaking cardinal who had it in for the English-speaking world, among other things. He was going to cut, trim the sails of those Americans who are ruining our liturgy, making it so colloquial as to be not prayerful, etc., etc., etc. That was the whole agenda. He got it in place. John Paul was in his last days. How much John Paul knew about it, who knows? But it got through into law. Liturgiam Authenticum. So I read it. I read Wilkins. I got madder and madder. And I just had the sense of personal outrage that this is a total hijacking of the Second Vatican Council. I don't know what else to call it. Episcopal collegiality, and everything, and I mentioned in that resolution we just voted on, Sacrosanctum Concilium gave the bishops the role to oversee translations and approve them, not the Vatican. The Vatican had a recognitio only. The bishops were the approvers, and they were the ones to make them happen. And it wasn't to be done by fiat from across the sea, and yet all of that was undone. All of that was undone. So, collegiality, out the door. And I just had my own pastor's instinct, which every one of you guys in this room can relate to. I felt I owed it to my people to do something. You know, speak up on their behalf. Because we don't have a voice, but they really don't have a voice, right? I mean, we have no voice. We almost prove that today. We don't think we do. We're afraid to use what little voice we have. But they really have no voice. They have a pocketbook, and they're so loyal they don't even like to use that. You know, my annual appeal last 2 weeks ago in the Archdiocese, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I had a goal set, they're not goals, they're assessments, you know that, set by the Archdiocese for my parish, $350,000. I needed to raise another 200 above that to meet budget, because we've been able to plan that people are that generous on that appeal. And this year, I thought for sure, you know, they would run the other direction. They had this referendum on gay marriage, and they had the LCWR and our bishop in charge of it all. Well, you know, I guess 20, 25 people put zeros, and then they sent the check to the church, the parish, as soon as we met our diocesan goal, because they weren't going to hold us hostage. People, they don't want to hold their money back. They want to support the church whatever way they find they can. They really have no voice. They don't. So I thought, I got to be their voice. And you know, I was a student in Rome on December 4th, December 4th, I think it was, 1963, the day that Sacrosanctum Concilium was promulgated. I was in St. Peter's Square that day. I thought it was one of the great days of my life. I'd grown up through college in Seattle, listening to, reading Gottfried Diekmann and all the great names that were bringing the liturgical reform to this country. And then that this moment should have come when I had heard a seminary rector say 2 years before, when I was a junior in college in Seattle in the Sulpician Seminary, if you think, gentlemen, you will see a vernacular liturgy in your time, wake up, have another thought, because it will not happen. It was 2 years later, you know? It was unbelievable. I stood there in St. Peter's Square thinking, this is impossible, but there it was. So I'm a child of that moment, and it formed me incredibly. So, like you, I care about the council, I care about my people, I care about the council. So, that's what got my blood going, and so back in June of it took me until 2009 to put pen to paper. I was stewing for a long time, you know, and I do quite a lot of that. But in June of 2009, I remember exactly where I was. I took my pen out. I don't even have a computer at home to tell you how computer illiterate I am. I have one in the office, but at home I keep for the sanctuary of, you know, being comfortable with things that I'm comfortable with. And so I sat down with my yellow legal pad, and pen was not a quill pen, but I took it and began to sketch out, you know, the outline, if you will. I never outline. I'm an extrovert. I write in order to think. I talk in order to think. And that's what I did. I just started writing. And my title was The Roman Missal. What if we just said no? Because that's really what I felt. I thought of a group like this. I thought if we could get to the priests across this country somehow, and we got together, what if we all stood up and said, God, no, we will not do this. We will not let you do this to us or our people. No. And I was really heated. I mean, it was, the paper almost self-destructed, as I recall. Because I had such righteous indignation about it. No, this is wrong. It should not happen. And we should not let it happen. And of course, how do you get that word out? So we had a clergy gathering out at the Ocean, our annual one, and I shared it with a few people whose opinion I trusted, and they said, "Oh, Mike, this is great, but oh my God, you know, you're going to have a hard time selling this one." And they said it to me genuinely, with care. They liked the ideas, they liked the whole thrust, but no was just a little too strong. And I had a hard time coming off of that, to tell you the truth. Just like I did. And, but I did come down off of it, and I thought, okay, second wind, I took it back to the drawing board, kept the major ideas, and then I had another title that I had to abandon, and I thought, okay, I'll be a little more shy, a little bit more humble. How about a modest proposal? That's been used before. But just as I finished that and kind of thought that might work, Paul Wilkes wrote a piece in the NCR by the same time where I thought, there goes a modest proposal. I mean, Jonathan Swift used it the first time, didn't he? But, you know, Jonathan Swift and Paul Wilkes, I didn't think I could join that exalted company, so I backed off that and I thought, go back to what if we just said, and I thought, and then I had to reframe the whole thing from no to, wait, how about doing the great American thing, a road test, you know, try it out. Let the people have some say. Imagine such an idea. People have a say. You know, I mean, but that was the thought, and the more I thought, I said, this is the work of the Holy Spirit. I think that is a right thing. That's not just an angry thing now. That's a constructive proposal. What if we did say wait? And I didn't, you know, condemn the thing in the article. I questioned it mightily. But I said, you know, before we, I didn't use the words, foist it on our people, let's road test it in selective parishes across the English-speaking world. It wasn't just the U.S., of course. We were talking about Australia, the U.K., and South Africa, and the Philippines, and you name it. It goes on and on and on. But what if certain parishes, big urban ones and rural ones, and maybe campus ministries and a chaplaincy and a nun's convent and whatnot, what if it was tested in, you name the number, across the English-speaking world for a whole year, from Advent to Advent, with a good evaluation tool? And what if that came back to the bishops? Wouldn't they learn from it? And shouldn't they be glad to learn from it? Didn't that make sense? It did to me. And it did to 23,300 other people, which my Archbishop told me, that was nothing. He said, 23,000 people, for God's sake. How many Catholics are there? I said, Archbishop, you tell me how many people even know there's going to be a missal, and I'll call it, you know, chicken feed. Nobody at that time, when I wrote that article, beyond the second pew and ourselves, knew anything about a new missal. So that it got that many signatures in a quick amount of time, I think was noteworthy. But anyway, that's what I came up with. And I toned it down. And when I sent it to America, Drew Christensen, the editor, who's become quite a nice friend now, but he got back to me and he said, I like your writing, it's very good. Would you be willing, he said, I've shown it to a few of the committee, would you be willing to, you know, do a little horse trading on this or that? And I said, within reason, as long as I don't have to abandon my main thrust. Well, they had very small changes to suggest, and I accepted them all. I had absolutely no problem with it. And lo and behold, they published it. And they paid me for it, for God's sake. Never thought of it. I was just having, you know, doing my thing, and I got a check in the mail, for God's sake. I wanted my social security number and all that. Anyway, but I had smarter people than me. I always surround my people with smarter people, and they're not hard to find. And I have them on my staff, and they basically said, now we got to set this thing up so that it's on the internet and people can make the, you know, the responses. It's the same person on my staff who's helping the AUSCP on the internet these days, Maria. God bless her. She you know, that I read that resolution over the phone to her at 11 o'clock this morning, you know, because I haven't got a computer here. I read it to her over the phone. I could hear her typing, and she was still in bed. It was 8 o'clock in the morning in Seattle. That's the God thing she puts up with. And then, you know, she had it emailed back to me within a half hour, and I gave it to, you know, and so they got a little more complicated, as Lynn knows, but basically that's what happened. So anyway, she's the one who said, we got to get this website up. And that's more complicated than anything I knew, but I can't tell you anything about that because it's a world that just is there. And you know, I can sign on to a website, but I can't tell you any of the mechanics of it, nor do I need to. But we tried to make it user-friendly for people to sign on quickly, have a kind of a statement. It was a resolution, if you will. People read it. Most people who read it, if they got that far, signed on. And they started to do it in, you know, pretty good numbers. Then I tried to use some personal networking that had nothing to do with the internet. I tried to get to people whom I personally knew over the years, people like Dick McBride at Notre Dame. I called Dick and I wrote to him and I said, you know, this is coming out. If you think to write about in your column, it'd be a big help. He did. I wrote to John Allen, did the same thing. John made sure that the NCR, in fact, NCR did an editorial piece on it shortly after it came out, almost half a back page of the NCR. I had been on the board of the NCR at one time, so I could sort of use those contacts, and I happily did. I even called George Weigel, for God's sake. I actually taught on the seminary faculty with George Weigel. You can tell who was on which side of the aisle. This was years ago in Seattle. George and I still exchange Christmas cards, but not much more. But anyway, I wrote to him thinking, surely, George, I said, a person of your literary tastes and accomplishments will realize what a disaster this is. I thought that was the only quote with George. Cater to his ego. It didn't work. He got back to me and he said, use your talents, your considerable talents, on something more worthwhile, he said. That was all I got from George. He likes it. So, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I wrote to some publications too. I wrote to the Tablet saying, you know, this is going to be in America, maybe you'll be interested. As a matter of fact, the Tablet was interested, and about a month after America published it, the Tablet published it almost verbatim with the permission of America. So it got quickly into the broader, you know, sphere, English-speaking world. I sent it to worship and never heard anything back from Collegeville. I even wrote to the abbot of Collegeville thinking maybe he could, you know, do something, but they were doing other things. I wrote to a whole bunch of my classmates and contemporaries from my days at the North American College in Rome, at least about 100 of them, saying, you guys are in parishes, you got friends, you know, here's a little network, trying to get something going there. And some of them got back to me quickly. I wrote to a whole bunch of national organizations, like the Deacons Organization, their national one, and nowhere there, I can tell you, except scolded that we stand with the magisterium. I'm a former deacon program director, I guess I was told. They stand with the magisterium. I wrote to the LCWR and I heard back from them. I wrote to Nadeo, the ecumenical group, had nothing from them. And I pitched to them, this is an ecumenical disaster. We're moving away from prayers that we can pray together. You should care about this. I heard nothing back from them. I wrote to NPM and got something back from them, but they were so invested in composing new glorias that I think they were more interested in other things. But I tried to kind of, and I'm just giving you samplings, I tried to reach out in lots of different directions nationally and even internationally to get this thing, you know, past the starting point. And some good things happened. Some really good things. I got an interview with NPR, all things considered. Problem was they decided to put it on Christmas afternoon. I think I heard from 3 people who heard it, you know, between the pumpkin pie and the turkey, whatever. I don't know. Yeah, it wasn't ideal. They did play it a couple of other times, but it was kind of a loss. Nice little piece, though, I thought.
Did they pay you?
They did not pay me, no.
Oh.
Yeah. I mentioned the NCR editorial. And then I remember getting to Milwaukee. We had a national meeting of cathedral ministers, which I've been part of for, 18 years or something. And we had our meeting that January. Imagine, we picked wonderful places like Tampa. We picked Milwaukee in January. We were there. Remember, Wakeland, God bless him, was the keynoter for that. And I walked up to him and he said, Michael, he said, 10,000 signatures. Now this was January, and the thing published in December. So December 14th, this was January 14th. Let's say, so 1 month, 10,000 signatures. I said, yeah, I said, but who's counting? He said, I am. Good for Rembrandt. I felt so supported. It was nice. Then at that same meeting, I still remember standing around having drinks, as we will tonight, with about 4 guys whom I knew, and 1 guy I didn't. But he had a clerical suit, the rest of us didn't. And I realized this was the just recently retired Archbishop of Cincinnati, Archbishop Pilarczyk, who saw my name tag and he said, Mike. So he pulled me aside from the little group and he said, and I'll never forget this, he said, Mike, no one in my position will tell you this, but I will. You have done service for not just the American church, but the English-speaking church. God bless you, good for you, but no one will ever tell you that. Then he said, and this is what I truly remember, he said, trust me, this thing has nothing to do with liturgy, nothing to do with prayer, only to do with... You got it, absolutely. That was Pilarczyk. Former chair of the Bishops' Conference, former chair of liturgy, former member of ISIL. He got the whole thing. He knew it backwards and forwards. Then we talked about the 2005 Commonweal, John Wilkins' article, and he said, John tells it exactly right. So that's, it's these kinds of reassurances. I guess you can understand a little bit why I get, why my blood did rise so high in the thermometer, whatever it is. So those things. That was a kind of a nice affirmation. Then it was interesting too. You know, I started hearing. I had friends around the world. It was really interesting. I was hearing from really important people. Good, thank you. But I really knew I arrived the day I got a phone call from Rocco Palmo telling me that his mother had signed on. Well, you know, I've never met his mother, but I don't think Rocco signed on, but his mother did. Then, of course, I had the local reaction from my own archbishop, which was not warm.
Is that Sartre at the time?
No,
Oh.
Alex Burnett,
Oh.
Detroit's gift to Seattle. And Alex, nice man, you know, decent bishop, right, Fabian?
Yeah.
Actually, I always thought that he had
He wasn't a
pretty
mercy.
good pastoral sense,
Yeah.
you know, that he knew which battles to pick and which didn't. But he basically told me to shut up. You know, you've said enough, you know, quiet down, I don't want you making this your co-celeb. And then Archbishop, I'm really insulted by that. You know, I've been a priest for 44 years, as I had at that time. I said, the co-celeb is the people I serve in the church that I love. That's my co-celeb. And for you to suggest otherwise is frankly insulting. I did. And then, yeah, I did. And then I said, if you're silencing me, you can. But, you know, you're not going to stop the movement because it's way beyond me. I said, there are people who will keep this going whether I ever put another thing into it. And I was right. So I basically stepped back, mostly, and let the people on my staff who were totally involved in it monitor the website, you know, do the emails and whatnot, and I stopped writing for the time being. But he, it was a little bit, you know, you like to think your bishop would say, good for you, you got published in America. I don't agree with you, but that's what I got from Peter Sarton, I will tell you. My article just last week, or 2 weeks ago, I sent it to Pete Sarton, our Archbishop now, who's carrying this awful, you know, burden of the LCWR, and I don't know the behind story on that, nor do I need to or want to, but I can tell you this much. I sent him my America article 3 or 4 weeks before it was published. I had a camera-ready thing from the publisher. Sent it to him, just said, I don't want you to be blindsided about this. We've talked about this before, which we had. I mean, not that article, but about the whole issue. We agreed to disagree. He had done the recordings for World Library for all the prayers, you know. He was kind of into it. He has a beautiful voice, you know. Anyway, I got the nicest note from him handwritten a few days ago. It was 3 weeks after he got it. He's been pretty busy. I was amazed he had time to put pen to paper for anything with what he's coming his way. But he said, Mike, thanks for sending your article. It's very well done. You know, I don't agree with you on all this stuff, but I respect your opinion on it. And I can tell you this, you know how to do liturgy well at the cathedral, Peter. Well, you know, what more can you ask for that? So I want to say that about him because I think, you know, let's get the whole story about this man. Anyway, but that was not what I got from Alex Burnett. But I knew I was doing something right when America gave a platform to a guy by the name, I've never heard of him before, but I know more about him now, Thomas Stravinskas. Does anybody know that name? Well, you know, you can live a whole life without knowing a lot about him, but they let him, not on the print copy, but online, take me on, and he took me on big time. But, you know, not very well, and he didn't get much of a following. And then there's stuff started appearing about him personally that wasn't too flattering. He's kind of a vagus, as we used to say, about his diocesan affiliations and whatnot, and they didn't have a whole lot of credibility. So there was that. I was very surprised. I asked Drew Christensen afterwards, I said, why did you ever give a platform to that guy who was so marginal? I'm saying, I'm glad you did, if you're going to give it to somebody. But he said we didn't check it out. You know, they did. So, but then they later gave it to Bishop Saratelli, who was 2 or 3 years behind me in Rome. And Saratelli, of course, was the chair of the liturgy. He said exactly what you would expect a Bishop Saratelli to say. But again, I didn't think it did much. Cardinal Mahoney wrote a piece that I thought he really embarrassed himself by. And I wrote personally to tell him so. I said, you've been my hero in matters liturgical. You built this great 21st century cathedral in such great enculturated idiom and whatnot. And then he took on a defensive dismissal that was antithetical to everything Mahoney has ever taught about liturgy. But I couldn't believe it, and I told him so. I still can't believe that he did it. And America printed that too, so they were trying to keep things straight, balanced. I understand that, but it was a little disappointing the way they did it. And then, of course, a opposing websites screw up quickly. What if we just said finally was one, we've waited long enough was another, and you know what? We had a guy, I mean, Maria on my staff, she had to monitor that website. I can say something nice about right-wing people, God loves them, right? I'm sure of that, absolutely. And I love some of them. But I never saw the kind of vitriol and some of the nasty and even unprintable and polite company vitriol coming from right-wing people that came onto that website. Unbelievable stuff. Expletives not deleted, and I mean, all ad hominem, ugly, ugly stuff from the right wing. So Maria had to monitor this all the time because you didn't really want that floating on the website. Then we had this wonderful guy down in South Africa who said, I'll monitor it through your night hours. And he did. Every night, daytime in South Africa, he was going to, what if we just said, wait and clean it up for us so that we wouldn't be embarrassed. So, but then again, you know you're doing something right, though, when people come after you that way. But it's really, I don't know, have you had that experience with the far right people? I mean, it's ugly, and I hope I don't treat them the same way. I try not to. I just, I take exception and I argue, but I don't call them names and I don't use, expletives deleted to speak to. Anyway, it was interesting. But we certainly became the punching bag on the blogosphere in lots of different ways, which you might expect. Okay. I will say that early then in April, when we'd gotten over 20,000 signatures, I sent this tome, and it's pretty hefty, to every bishop in the American hierarchy, every one of them, and to almost every bishop in the English-speaking world. Bankrolled by a good friend of Bishop Don Troutman, who Don put me in touch with and said, he's got some money, he likes what you're doing, he'll support your cause, and he did, big time. It cost a lot of money to mail this tome. It's like a telephone book for a small city. And it's got all the signatures, all you guys are in here who signed it. And in the back, we tried to present it in a way that would get their attention. Some notable signers, people like, well, Gerard Sloyan, Richard Bosco, Lawrence Madden, Rita Ferroni, Richard Bell, theologians, John Coleman, Raymond Kemp, Thomas Roush, Peter Pfaff, James Wallace, John O'Malley. John told me, he actually called me and said, I never sign things like this, but I'm signing yours. Timothy Radcliffe did the same. People like, so we separated all those things out, then academics and scholars, they're all listed so they could see at a glance some of the really high-powered people who lined up with this thing. And then page after page after page of the best comments, and the comments, some of them are brilliant. I mean, Maria went through, 20,000 comments to come up with 500 or 400 or however many, or not even that many, the very best. Every bishop in the English-speaking world, almost every bishop, got this. You can pass it. And I heard from one. I heard from one. No, Don, I didn't need to hear from. We were in touch. No, the one I heard from was because of a relationship I have with them from the past, was the Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago, who wrote back to me to say, I disagree with everything you've said, except one thing, he said. And I had made the point in the covering letter, if nothing else here is persuasive to your excellencies, eminences, surely this moment at which the credibility of the hierarchy is in such jeopardy, and I forget what words, you can imagine. So I said it very delicately, but people were, my God, people were after bishops everywhere. Surely that would say this is not an opportune moment to be doing this. He granted that point and said it must be done anyway. So, and he was right, and it happened. So, that's kind of what happens. I think maybe here's a funny little thing. I wrote to Archbishop de Noia too at the Congregation for Divine Worship at the Vatican. I knew, of course, if something from me in Seattle arrived on his desk, it would be quickly jettisoned. So I called Archbishop Tom Kelly in Louisville, whom I know, saying, Tom, No, deny, you ordained him a bishop. Yes, he said. What do you want? What do you mean? What do you want? I said, would you write him and tell him I'm not an absolute nutcase from the left coast? You know, tell him that you know me and that, you know, I'm a halfway respectable person, and et cetera. He said, I'd be happy to. And Tom wrote a beautiful letter, which he sent a copy of to me, to Denoya. I hear nothing. So, you know, what happens when they're all ears are deaf? Not very much. I do remember a conversation though I had, and this was kind of humorous. I don't know who knows Rick Hilgardner. I don't know Rick. I know him by reputation to be a good guy. He called me one day from his office at the USCCB liturgy. He said, I'm going to be out in Seattle to give the presentation, you know, the dog and pony show. He said, I thought I should talk to you first, get the lay of the land. I said, Rick, I can relieve you of any worry whatsoever. I'm going to be in Europe when you're coming. He was so relieved. Oh, he said, I really wanted to meet you. I'm really sorry. Anyway, so I did hear afterwards. It was the typical dog. They came in and there were no problems and there were no questions and everybody listened to this and they, you know, they walked away and there it was. But a couple of other things. I did write another article that I submitted to America. And this one I guess I'm a little embarrassed about, but only a little. I wrote it and sent it to them. And the pitch of this article was, this was now September of his last year. So 2 months before the implementation, okay? September. I sat down and wrote this article, and I was talking about how I was visiting with my priest friends, okay? And how they were telling me what they were going to do with the missile. This relates to the resolution that we didn't go for. They were saying, oh God, I'm not going to say that crap. I'm going to change it the way I want to. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. And they'd say to me, of course, Ryan, you're so invested, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm not going to change a word. What? I said, I'm not going to change a word. Not because I'm virtuous, but because I really feel the only way this thing will be properly evaluated is if people hear it. As I put in my original version of the article, in all its awkward awfulness. You know, they need to hear it. If we sanitize it for them, keep cleaning it up, they won't know, you know? So I said, no, I am not going to change a word. Well, America almost took it, and Drew Christensen called me and he said, you know, it's kind of a mixed message. We decided not to take it. I was disappointed, but, you know, then I sent it to the Tablet, who immediately took it. The Tablet published in September last year, but they did me in. Here it is. It's bannered on the front cover. Order of the Mass, New Translation, and it says, time to say yes. Okay, and the sub is, Michael G. Ryan campaigned for the latest version of the missile to be delayed. Now he welcomes it. Well, you know, either the editor didn't read it, or doesn't understand irony, or whatever. But so I had to write a letter to the editor that got published 3 weeks later. I said I welcomed that, you know, about as much as, you know, the Czechs welcomed Hitler's troops or something. I forget what I said, but it was kind of did me in a little bit. I felt bad. Anybody who read it knew I didn't welcome it, but still, it was a kind of an unfair thing. Yes.
You know, I had that same feeling, like just everything as it is, so people could really know firsthand what it's like. And I was going to do it for a year.
Yep.
But I just find it very hard to go beyond now.
Well, I will be honest with you. I'm starting to change it too, because first of all, and I mentioned that in my latest article in America. You know, I think what was it? A woman, one of my parishioners. She's a professor. Sometime professor at Brown University. She commutes both coasts, but she wrote to me. I mean, I was telling her that was, here's it. Speaking for myself, it was difficult to make the decision to implement the missile, but I took hope in the thought that our people, once they heard it, would speak out. Some have, but most people have been quiet. A friend recently asked me how realistic it was to expect the people to speak up about the missile. I quote, this is her quote, I don't know if you're right to hope that your people will resist even as you yourself are yielding and going along with the diminished mass. They trust you and they will follow your lead. I said, her question has kept me awake some nights. Yeah? Anyway, gentlemen, I think, I mean, what more can I say? Did I learn anything? Yes, how to be, you know, how to be ignored, how to be beaten down, but how also to kind of feel good in your conscience that you did something. And gave some people, for a while at least, a little hope. It may have finally vanished, and maybe that's unfortunate. You set them up for hope and then it gets dashed. But I did discover, now this is how I wrote it down when I was preparing these notes, and I think it's true, and probably relates to what we talked about earlier. By avoiding saying everything that was on my mind, not unloading all my angst and anger over the state of the church, by taking a little more nuanced, middle-of-the-road approach, which I thought it was, I was able to draw people who were not on the far left to sign up, as well as people with some prominence. This turned out to be not just a liberal conservative issue. Interestingly, I found. It was very interesting. I got some people with really good, conservative credentials saying, I'm totally with you on this, because it has to do, I'm not looking at the authority part of it, I'm looking upon the thing itself, and it's awful, So it was interesting, you could draw some people in, and actually I did, although most of the people sided with me, I think we put on the left side of things. Bernie?
Yeah, I got a couple things. In the course of downloading the priest diocese by diocese, I also called some of them because I didn't have a snail mail address to send the survey to. And interestingly, a small number said that they had repented for having put their name on there.
Oh, I'm sure there were those. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
The second thing is a large number of those who signed anonymously.
Okay, I meant to say something about that.
How many priests, do you know how many priests signed actually?
I had the numbers at one time, and I wish, I don't with me. I'm sorry I didn't think, I did break that out at one time.
Close to 1,000 Americans.
Yes, okay, you
Yeah,
know
close to
that.
1,000
So I'm
Americans.
gonna say there were probably 2,500 priests, maybe
The whole world,
3,000
yeah.
around the world. There were more anonymous among the priests than anybody, which is, I felt that was too bad. It's the reality, isn't it?
Right.
It's the reality. Then there were people in our chancery office who signed on to it, but they told me I've got to do it anonymously. They wanted their job. There were lay people who signed anonymously. Many of them told me because they worked for the church or they didn't want to get on their pastor's bed, whatever. Nuns typically did not sign anonymously. They just did. Nuns have nothing to lose. Nuns have everything, but they have nothing to lose, I think. I have a sister who's a nun.
Priests who repented, did they say why?
They've been persuaded that
They saw
the new changes are really an improvement.
It really are. We did a little survey in our parish, and it was, I can't say it's representative of our parish, but 300, almost 400 people responded to an online survey. It's a little bit indicative. I mean, I would have hoped it would have followed a little differently, but this is the honest truth. We asked how many masses they'd gone, so we want to know if they'd been to 1 or 10, but just to get, my new reaction to the text is 31% said neutral, 15% said positive, 32.7% said negative. There were 8.4 very positive, and 12, almost 13, very negative. It was a very objective questionnaire. I went to a professional for it. It didn't say you really hate the new missile, do you? Nothing like, it was in fact, in the way we lined up the questions, there was no, it was just very even-handed. So it fell out that way. The negatives certainly came to be almost 50%, and the neutral 31%, so it tells you something. There was another question. The general reaction in our parish seems to be 51% neutral, 20% positive, 26% negative. The Cathedral Parish prepared me well for the text. 86.6% said they did. And I have to tell you, we did not use one piece of boilerplate from the Bishop's Committee on that. I couldn't do it in conscience. I just couldn't, not after the positions I'd taken. We developed our own. We have a brilliant liturgy director who's also very literary, and she did a fantastic job. We had bulletin inserts. We had meetings after Mass for those who would like to come. We had a whole series of lectures on liturgy in itself, liturgy presentations to get people a context for what this was all about. We took it very seriously, and people obviously felt they were helped. 85% said they got their information from the bulletin inserts. 23% went to after Mass sessions on the texts. And then 10% attended the lecture series. That's about the way it goes in parishes, isn't it? Lecture series. Here's the real telling question though for me. I believe the new texts will deepen my prayer life over time. That's pretty even-handed, isn't it? Not at all. 67%. Not at all. Somewhat 23%. So it tells you. And the responders, the largest number of responders were 45% of the responders were age 51 to 70. That's kind of predictable, right? The next largest group was 36 to 50, 30%. And God bless, 15% were like me, 71 or older. And then we asked what mass they attend on the weekend. It was telling. It was a little vignette. Yes.
Do you have a copy of that we use in our own parishes?
I would happily, I could email this survey very easily. I'm trying to think, somebody more technologically adept than me can tell me how best to do that. I guess if you send me an email.
Yes. Can we send an email to
Maria? Send it to Maria, 'cause she's gonna get it anyway.
Your email's on this.
I know, Maria's email is on that resolution.
So if you send an email to her.
She will do it, and I will ask her forgiveness after. She would, she's very fit, she'd be happy to do it. It's a simple link that she can give you to the survey. Yes,
Well, as I said, I was a little sorry your original proposal didn't go. But I think that in honesty, I've come to the conclusion that I have to adjust the text because when they don't make any sense and when they use language. I think we can't simply write off intelligibility and since we're trying to evangelize, we can't just let this thing lay. We have to.
Right.
Pastorally, I'm trying to evangelize a parish, and I can't, if I write off the texts, I just say them as they are. You heard the final prayer today.
yes.
I mean, Dave tried to do, he tried masterfully to make sense, but there was
stumbled
no
all
way,
over it, didn't
there
he?
was no way
Yeah.
to make sense of it. And one resolution I've come out of this is that sometimes I'm too lazy to have read the text before I go. And one resolution is that I'll try not to be that lazy in the future, and therefore make the adjustments.
Thank you.
An anecdote, I had a wedding about 6 weeks ago in another parish a few counties away, and the people, I'd never met the priest, who was the pastor, who'd been there 18, 20 years, and all they kept telling me was, oh, he is the most rigid, conservative guy, blah, blah, blah. You are going to be in trouble. So I didn't meet him at the wedding, but I had a mass next day, and he said to me, as we're talking, he says, now do you use the Roman Missal? And I said, of course. And he said, oh, I'll see if I can find it. And now this was a very traditional guy. That's why it was very interesting to hear about the. And he said, I can't pray. I can't pray with the new Roman Missal. And so he's using the 98 version online, and he just pulls it out.
He just pulls it up. Yeah, the 98 version is available on the What If We Just Said website, by the way. It is there. Here's an interesting. Yeah, go ahead. No, please.
You mentioned that John Larson article.
Yeah, Jan Larson. Jan is a priest of the Archdiocese of Seattle, a liturgist with fine credentials out of Notre Dame. Jan wrote a piece, he sent it to me, 6, 8 months ago, on canonical, he reasoned canonically from canon law how changes can and even could be made to texts, liturgical texts. And he sent it to me, and I said, Jan, this thing shouldn't stay on your little internet list. You should send it to worship. Because it was of that caliber. It was heavily footnoted, carefully researched. He's a very bright scholar. He sent it to worship, and lo and behold, they printed it about 2 months ago. I forget the title of it, but if you look for Jan Larson, and he reasons canonically why you can and even perhaps should make changes in liturgical texts. It's very well done.
Doesn't David Wright do the same thing?
David Wright does the same thing, I think, Bernie. Yeah.
He has an article.
Here's a fun, this is from one of our, I mean, this could be you, this could be you, this couldn't be me because it's too funny. But he's a priest in Cottonwood, Minnesota. I've never heard of it. Anybody know where Cottonwood, Minnesota is? I hope I'm not blowing his cover. Okay. He writes to me just recently, he says, in regard to the new sacramentary, I have yet to use the new translation of the Nicene Creed. I never will. The Apostles' Creed works fine. And why do you continue, I don't know, I think he means why do people, continue to stumble over the garbage written by people who don't speak English? I keep a pencil and eraser on the altar to make needed corrections. I love this. This guy is great. I mean, I wish he was here. The prefaces are often worst of all. The Easter season was especially bad. I think I have settled on number 3 as needing the fewest rewrites. By the way, I made fun in my latest article in America on overcome with paschal joy. I mean, for God's sake. I mean, we're all happy about Easter, but overcome, I mean, slain in this, yeah, overblown, I'd say. Then he says, my favorite blooper. Oh, look, God, see Spot run and see to the obliteration of your church. Then he goes on to say, people in the pews are even more enraged than we are. However, they are smart enough to know if they need a safe forum to speak. I have yet to hear any priest who's like the dewfall. Oh, actually, I have. He wants to know, is it a parody on condensation? I don't know. He knows the dew doesn't fall anyway. I never say chalice. I devoted a homily Holy Thursday to why Jesus never had a chalice or used a chalice and so never took a chalice. I love it. Did you read John Donahue's piece? John Donahue's piece in Commonweal just last week on cup or chalice. John's brilliant, beautifully done. Huh?
It's in the packet that you...
Oh, it's good. Yeah. Well, John is, he gets this book. There are several heresies in the given text. This includes a Unitarian Trinity, he says. He must have been writing in the shadow of Trinity Sunday. I, of course, like to point it out in my America article, the prayer on the Immaculate Conception, which said that Mary, like her, we too might be cleansed from sin. I mentioned that this would surely get the attention of the Bishop's Committee on Doctrine, which is chaired by my esteemed classmate, the Cardinal Archbishop of Washington. The Prevenient Grace, of course. He says, I often use one of the Swiss canons. He spells it like it really would shoot cannonballs. Not only is there no Latin original, this is interesting. He's talking about the Swiss canons. He says, not only is there no Latin original for anyone to claim as the UR text, but they are theologically quite satisfying. And I think he's right. Also, they are not printed in the OCP missalette, so when the liturgical police show up, they can't even be sure. And when all is said and done, I have the opportunity to say my last weekend Mass at noon in the big church next door in Spanish, so I can find out what I have been saying. This guy's great. We should make him an honorary member. Anyway, so, questions, observations? Yes.
I'm curious, I mean, I've nicknamed us the editors, if that goes anywhere. But it seems to me what might be a good idea is if we had, I don't know, a website or whatever of all these editing things we're doing, rather than just chaotically, all of us being as creative as we can imagine, if there's some sort of a settling of what is good, what is appropriate, what says it better, somewhere along the line. I mean, I don't want to impose it, but for me to know,
kind of a pool of suggestions.
Yeah, for me to know what other people have done with this stuff. And
I don't know how to make that happen, but I bet it could be. I mean, people just, it can be complicated though, wouldn't it? Because there's so many texts.
Right,
but the software.
but if you did a website or something just for the text for the next week, do it. Yeah, I don't want to do the whole. I'm just doing it mass by mass. You know, my pencil and eraser never leaves me. I make a mental note when I missed one during Mass, I gotta fix it for the next one at the next church.
Well, it's a good idea, maybe something like
But if you had, you know, something on a week-by-week basis.
Well, I think that's a great idea.
The Churchill Press could put that out, except they're in the publishing business.
Yeah.
Fat chance.
I mean, like Robert Barron's thing on a homily every week
Yeah,
on
Yeah.
Word on Fire, if there's,
I think it's a great idea. I just, you know, it would take somebody with some time and
Right.
some ability to make that
but
happen.
I think that would, I mean, I'm not in the total protest, I'm just doing it. But it would be a little more credible in terms of our dismay
Yeah,
if there was sort of a consensual kind
Yeah.
of thing that's
It would.
evolving.
it'd be great to get somebody
Rather
like Bob
than just
Barron to
everybody
take it
doing
out himself, but I know Bob wouldn't. But that, I mean, that type of
Yeah.
thing, yeah, well, maybe.
Well, because
Now,
sometimes-
somebody, let's do 1, 2, and 3.
A suggestion about that might be the ISIL 97, 98 translation. I mean, it's already done it.
Yeah.
So my approach is to look at what they've done, and 9 out of 10 times I just you know,
You just
adopt
take it.
theirs because then you don't have to go through a lot of.
I think it's very.
And if you
it's
just
very
you
well done.
know, get a secretary to type it out in you know, 14, 16 you know, type and put it in a binder, you know, I mean.
Which website do you get it off? Do you take it off?
No, I downloaded the ISIL, yeah, it's in the, you know, misguided missile.
Yes, it's on misguided missile, it's on, what if you just said wait, it's on both of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll take a couple of hours to download. the whole
Is
thing.
it available in print anywhere?
No,
No, you can't.
it's, well, there's a printed version on gathering dust on a shelf in the Vatican.
Nobody really published it at all.
Oh,
Their own?
no,
Weren't allowed.
no, they weren't allowed to. I mean, it's, you know, it really, when I told you about Dr. Page, John Robert Page, when I talked to him, the grief, and that's the only word that you can to describe that he is taking really will take to the grave over this. And he would never miss a Sunday Mass, but he'll email me, he goes to Trinity Georgetown all the time for Mass, and he'll email the latest outrage, you know, and says, oh, Michael, you know, I just, you know, he's crying over it. And it was love's later lost. He and a wonderful group of people, for 25 years he was involved with it, and for that translation for 17 years.
Wow.
Doing it. It's just amazing. And nobody knows this story. That's what I said to my Archbishop when I first met with him. The New York Times was after me to do an interview. Burnett, the Archbishop who had silenced me, had moved on. I thought, well, maybe I should, before I start speaking, I guess I should check in with the new boss. So I did. And I had a nice meeting with him. It was lovely. He received me very well. He let me know early on that we were on different pages. Didn't surprise me. But he said it in such a respectful way, and he listened to me and I to him through about a 45-minute thing. But at one point, I did quote for him Archbishop Kolarczyk. This is not about, you know, liturgy. This is not about prayer. This is about power. And he looked at me, I mean, genuinely flummoxed. He said, it's not about power for me. And I said, Archbishop, I know it's not. Absolutely. I don't think anything is about power. He's not a power guy. I said, that's the story. May I send you the stuff? Can I send you John Wilkins' article? Yes, he said, send me anything. I don't know if he's ever read it. But he didn't know any of the story. He knew none of the story. And he's a San Anselmo liturgy guy, you know, but I guess he was too busy being a bishop down in Little Rock and Joliet. You know, the bishops, they didn't do their homework. And it's the backstory that tells the whole story. Yeah, Martin.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem is some of the bishops pushing this are not very good liturgy, but I
Well,
think,
yes.
yeah, I think sometimes it'd be interesting to have just a survey, maybe just voluntary, maybe by email to the siders. You know, ask guys to submit their top 5, if they were given a chance to change 5 things specifically, what were the top 5 things, and then the reason behind them, and then just do it, and then maybe turn the list to the top 10.
We could do that.
We could do it to our email list, 550 members who use email.
Yeah.
Just a survey, the same idea.
Sure, that's
Have the top 5 changes you make, and then kind of tally those, and then print the top, you know, like David Letterman's top 10 with, with kind of a condensed reasoning behind, or rationale behind.
That could be kind of fun.
Or there's 2 board members, send it to us, all right?
Yeah,
That'd be one interesting thing, but another thing would be to include in that what they like.
Yeah.
Sure, there are some nice things.
Exactly.
I like welcome into the light of your face, somehow that touches me, it's kind of poetic and beautiful. There are a few
A
things.
lot of guys didn't know about the various prayers.
Well, yes,
They
that's
had
true.
never used them.
Yeah, it's true.
I think it's excellent, do the top 5 things I like, the top 5 things I would change.
Draft it, Michael, and send it to us.
Yeah, I'm interested.
Okay, Mark, yeah, that's good, that's a good suggestion. Because, yeah, I even acknowledged in my America, you know, what things are working and what things are not. Because it's true. It's not a total mess.
Rising to the sun is setting, that's actually.
It's not, it's nice. I agree. Yes.
Michael knows, I wrote an article too, right after we started
Yes.
using the missile. It was printed in the NCR in late January.
It's very well done.
Well, it just came to me as a kind of an iconic explanation. My dad went to one-room country grade school out in central Kansas, early part of the 20th century. One teacher. Well, one day, some of the older boys in the school came to school early, brought a ladder with them, climbed up on the roof with a .22 caliber rifle and a flask of some kind of beverage. I don't know if it was beer, but anyhow. And when the teacher arrived, they dared him to make him try to come down, which he did not succeed in doing. So I said, the schoolboys, instead of the teacher, pretty well ran the school that day. I said, for my dad, he was pretty big, he was just a kid, made a pretty impressive memory on him. For the rest of his life, whenever something wasn't right, went wrong, wasn't well done, he would just say, well, the schoolboys are running things over there. The schoolboys are. So I said, as I began to use the new English translation of the Roman numeral, my dad's expression came to me just clear as day. The schoolboys are running things in the church these days. And they have no, I said, they're not up to the task, and they're messing things up for the rest of the church. And then I went on about this whole liturgy on Authenticam. I said, who wrote that thing? It too has marks of a schoolboy, some schoolboy product. I said, any document of the Second Vatican Council, can you read it with a lot of hope, enthusiasm, and wisdom? That thing reads like something that KGB would have written for the Soviets, citizens of the Soviet Union. But I went on to say that they have no real authority. They have usurped authority. They think they have authority. They don't have authority.
Yeah.
They're messing things up in the church these days.
Yeah.
They have no authority.
Well, you heard, I guess it was Rembrandt who quoted the very, very highly credentialed conservative theologian, philosopher, Peter Jeffrey, referring to Liturgiam Authenticam as the singular most ignorant document to come from a Roman congregation in 500 years, whatever he said. I mean, that was from somebody who normally would be cheerleading for it, but who could?
You know what we got to excise out of the church as soon as we can. This may take 100 or 500 years, I don't know. We've got to excise the influence of Opus Dei. They're the ones in charge.
There's another workshop title. Tim?
Before we inundate poor Maria with all our questions, the survey is already on your website on What If We Just Said Wait. And you can get all the results plus all the complete comments. So just go to the
Did you hear
website.
that?
And
Go to
the
What If We
survey's
Just
there.
Said Wait, and the survey is there, shows you how much I know about it. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Yes, Peter?
I had one thing to say, but I want to switch
Yeah,
it now.
please.
Go way back to something you said about your bishop's choice that you had to do, and the assessment and all that. That you were able to raise the money even though people were
Oh, yeah.
dissatisfied.
Yeah.
Just something there to me that you have a connection with your people in the parish.
Yeah.
That they see the goodness of what we're trying to do, and they're going to give us a lot more leeway than those people upstairs.
Oh, yeah.
And I just think that's where it rests for me anyway.
Yeah.
That yes, the liturgy, I have been done in by the liturgical police severely. I had my pastorship taken away from me a few years ago because of it. But the people in the pew are so with us on this, and I just think we gotta let them bring us along.
Well said, Peter. I was thinking of Tip O'Neill, wasn't it, who said all politics is local? I mean, this is where they connect with the church. If we're serving them with love and care, praying with them, and they're going to stand up for us and be with us. They may not always agree with us, but they're going to do that for us. Oh, yes.
It sort of shifts a bit, my comment is that, just tell you a story about the founding fathers. When we were leaving Underline last August, the average median age was like 70.
Yeah.
But we felt like we were newly ordained. We felt a real fire in the belly that we were about doing something that was so exciting, that we were going to be people who could really, with a voice, a united voice, with our people as pastors, that we could really begin to approach and speak with this kind of authority that's organized, that has power. Organized people and organized money equals power.
Here, here.
You're altered Christi, right?
So this is, this is what I hope that is going to come out of the kind of agitation when I hear Mike's story, the really authentic story, and the fullness of the story. That I think that not an anger to get even, but something that we just can't let it be taken away and transformed. That we have to be the alternative, maybe not an alternative, at least an interdependent voice with the magistrate. They have to listen to us.
Thank you. I think you said it very well. I have to, when you said anger, and I have to own that part of what was driving the resolution that I withdrew was my deep conviction, born of some anger, that the bishops are going to think they got away with this, and we shouldn't let them think they got away with this. But I think that mode of doing it was probably not constructive, so I own the fact that it was better to move in a different direction. But I appreciate what you said, and I also, somebody else had it.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, please.
Well, I just wanted to say that one of the good things about getting a little older is time is running out. And it's a good thing in the sense that you want to do the best. And I'm hoping the association, besides what we do on liturgy, which we talked about, that will say, how do you evangelize in a postmodern culture? And we'll take the best of what we'll do. How do we minister? How do we challenge Catholics who are really not generous to step out? All of these major questions that unfortunately bishops don't care about. I agree with Benedict that there is a serious evangelization problem. I don't agree with his solution. But one of the ways that I see, my parish is mostly young adults, right? And so I say, somebody has to find Jesus in the Catholic Church. They can't all find Jesus by leaving the Catholic Church. We have to, and that's what I hope that'll come, because actually, I've never had a bishop that ever had any pastoral experience, Not one of the three bishops in Arlington had ever served a day in parish. Well, I mean, as associate, while they went to school. But none were a pastor. And so
Most of us have that situation.
I can't ask them. They have no experience at all about a parish. So that's the way Rome's chosen. So it's up to us, really.
Well, I think it is too, and I go back to Peter there too, and it sort of comes around to, how do we keep hope alive in the church where Vatican II reached. What was the title that I was whatever it was. I think we all know how to do it. I think it's what we're doing in our parishes. I think it is. Being there with the people, for the people, leading them in prayer, listening to the secrets of their hearts, cheering them on, giving them hope, and bending the rules. All the things we need to do as pastors, I think that's how we do it. And, I don't know of any other way.
On Chuck's comment about knowing Jesus, Father Gerzone that wrote the Joshua books, remember? Yeah. Has a new book out, maybe you're aware of it, called The Homeless Bishop. And it is exactly on this topic. He's a 31-year-old archbishop in southern Italy who get this idea that he's never gonna really know Christ unless he identifies with the poor. That Matthew 25 says our salvation depends on how we treat the poor. So he's a friend of the Pope in Italy, and the Pope gives him an open-ended sabbatical. He goes for 1.5 years to America because he doesn't want to be recognized in Italy. And I mean, he becomes a homeless beggar. First, he's awkward with it. He's very unknown by it. It's way harder than he thought. And then, by the end of the 1.5 years, he is a homeless beggar more than a priest or a bishop. You know, he goes back to being a bishop, and he becomes the nuncio in Iran, modern times, with all the, things like that. It makes me, I'm almost finished with it, it makes me cry 100 times.
What's the title of it again?
The Homeless Beggar. The Homeless Bishop. The Homeless Bishop, Joseph Gerzon.
Thanks for telling us. That sounds
Is that how we
like
pronounce his last name?
Jerry?
Gerzon or is it Gerzon or Gerzon?
If it's Italian, it's Gerzon.
Gerzon, yeah.
Okay.
Jerry, you and Jerry.
Well, I just wanted to say 2 things that I hope you give us hope. Well, one is, when Len introduced you, he went through the history of how we got here, but basically said, you wrote this article. But then we got the name list, but first of all, you wrote this article not saying, oh, I think I'll form a priest association. Yeah, that's what I'll do. You wrote this article because you thought you could be a little bit of a voice for your people, and you thought, who knows who will listen, but they won't listen to them. So I think we have to believe that sometimes we plant little seeds that really do become much bigger things, but you just did some little thing you felt like you had to do, and God can take it wherever God wants to. So but I believe we all do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Of course we do.
And the second thing is that you talk about your fear of the bishop, and I've had some run-ins with bishops, and with Archbishop Burke, so professional, big time bishops, and I would just say that we give bishops way too much power. They're really the Wizard of Oz. But if we think that they're the wizard, then they're the wizard. But one of the great blessings of getting older, and then besides that, I had cancer, I've been told lots of times that I'm incurable. So what do I care? Hey, I'm going to die. But we're all going to die, and we're all kind of close to it. We're going to say, and so being miffed by bishops and letting them play their power games, because we can be so subservient to little boys. We do ourselves a disservice, and we do them a disservice. And the day Archbishop Burke, got promoted to the Vatican, God bless him. I was tempted to sing the anthem song, Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. But we didn't sing that. I didn't even suggest it. But I think that we give too much power, and I don't know. When he was going to suspend me or whatever he's going to do, and I'm spending half of my money each month on a canon lawyer, and I'm saying, why do you do this? I have classmates who are retired who don't do anything electronically. Their check is put into their account. And I'm spending half of my money to pay a canon lawyer for the privilege of being in his parish. I'm saying, I'm having too much fun. I'm giving people hope. And so he was gone, and I just said, hey, I fired my canon lawyer. I don't need you anymore.
Jared, beautiful. Well said. Jared, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
It's a little different topic, but how a little step can mean a lot. When the LCWR thing came down in our parish, that weekend I just kind of preached about it, and we announced we were having a conversation about it Wednesday night. And that went out on the internet and on listservs that I knew nothing about. We've had these little parish conversations once in a while, 40 people, 50. Well, we had 150 people
Wow.
come. We had religious women from 8 congregations,
Wow.
women who were not part of our parish. 20 or so sisters were part of our parish, but people were just a place to talk, and all it was described as a conversation. And that's all it was. You know, we weren't ranting, but you know, people were like, "Are you going to get in trouble for this?" And it's like, no, you know, but that's the fear, that you're going to get in trouble for having a conversation. And the more we do things like that, the less we will be afraid to have a conversation.
Yeah. Find our voice.
We find our voice.
We have each other.
We have each other, and we do have a voice. And we've
There's
got
600 of us.
Cajones too.
We're in a
Last time I checked.
Yeah, I mean, what are they going to do?
So, you know, we could get out, class could dismiss early. David?
I just want to make one statement that I think one of the challenges as a group is the future. Because, you know, I've ordained 42 years, and I'm not the oldest one by far in this group.
No, you're not.
And I think, you know, I think one of the challenges is trying to, I think what we do have common is we experienced that gift to that historic Vatican II, which to me was maybe the most significant council since Nicaea, and that's exactly it. People who have been, like my associate who was born after I was ordained, and he's not a bad person or anything, but to be able to, I think one of our challenges is to be able to share that, what we went through, to the next generation, to realize wasn't some aberration of the 1960s. This is the work of the Holy Spirit with 2,500 bishops coming together. And I think that's one of our challenges that we should be trying to do.
Well said.
Electricity.
Yeah. Well, anything more for the good of the order? Let the record read that we finished 5 minutes. Thank you, it's been fun.